You're watching BCTV. We're all about Brantford. You're watching BCTV, Brantford Government Television, a service of Brantford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Brantford.
Okay, we're going to get started with the Town of Brantford Board of Finance special meeting dated May 21st, 2020. And first on the agenda, well, before we get started, I just want to thank everybody for participating. And due to the circumstances of COVID-19, hopefully everybody is healthy and well. However, we're using technology, three various types of technology to try to conduct this meeting so that we can conduct the town's business. So there may be some gaffes from here to there, but hopefully we'll get through it in good fashion.
Mr. Chairman?
First,
Wayne, just want to make sure that we're not muted. I'm being muted by the host, and I want to make sure that...
You know, we're going to conduct this meeting the way that I do on every Board of Finance meeting. The agenda has got citizens' comments, and I will call on citizens' comments appropriately. After the citizens' communications or comments, which we enable approximately 10 minutes, and hopefully 3 minutes per person or less for any comments, we'll move on to the other agenda items. Agenda item number 1 is citizens' communications. Is there someone who would like to, from the public, that would like to comment on the agenda items?
I'd like to comment on, not the agenda items, I want to comment on a couple other things.
You can comment on agenda items, and I'll give you several minutes to do so, Wayne.
Well, I mean, there's a couple points. I think I was the individual that was responsible for initiating this citizen comment section of your meetings. And I never remember it being limited to agenda items. It was always wide open to what the citizens wanted to say. Because how else would I express myself or anybody else unless...
Wayne, right now your time is moving, so I would suggest that you get to your point. Okay,
well, here's my point. 2 points, actually. The first point is this, that I'm concerned about the transparency of this board. Back in October, on October 22nd, I sent this letter to you. You referred to it, but you didn't read it. You didn't do anything with it. And what it was basically asking was, can you explain the fund balance, why it's as high as it is? And in addition, can you explain the insurance amount also? Now the fund balance, I quoted as 25 million. And I said that most towns use 10%, and Brantford is far in excess of that. The insurance is about 20 million. And, I got no response. I asked for a response, asked for a written response on behalf of the citizens so that we can understand this. And you just completely ignored the letter. So I don't know what your thinking was behind that, but I think if a citizen sends a letter with valid concerns, that it should be addressed. The other thing I want to address is a few weeks ago, my understanding that this board transferred $6 million from one fund into the other. And there was no reference to that other than very vaguely on your agenda. And not only that, but the RTM wasn't even made aware of it. So what kind of a relationship do you have with the RTM when I thought you both were responsible for the finances in this town, where you go and transfer $6 million and the RTM doesn't even know you did it? Never went before them. So that's the transparency issue. And I think that needs to be addressed. And I hope the RTM takes as much exception to it as I do. On another note, and this is important, probably more relevant, if there's $25 million in the account, the fund balance account, and I've asked the finance director about this, and he's explained it somewhat, but not entirely to my satisfaction. And it seems high to most people. Why, under these circumstances, this crisis that we're in, doesn't the town, and I mentioned this to the Board of Selectmen last night, why doesn't the town seriously consider helping some of the struggling businesses out there, which, you know, I think nobody would deny is going on, with some of this fund balance, which quite frankly was put in place by overtaxation. It's really the taxpayers' money. You could make an argument that a certain amount of it should go back to the taxpayers because we have too much in there. So why not give it back to them when they need it the most? And I think that needs to be seriously addressed by this board, by the Board of Selectmen, by the RTM, and anybody else. So, Mr. Chairman, you got two issues. One, what I consider to be the complete lack of transparency of this board, and I think it's really got to be addressed. And two, the fund balance, and why don't you take some of it and give it to people who seriously need it when it's just sitting there right now doing nothing, which it always does, other than, you know, increase our bond rating, which you don't need $25 million to increase your bond rating to AAA. And I think that's just in excess. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Wayne. We'll take those under consideration.
Mr. Chairman?
No, but when? When are you going to take them under consideration? But you said that about the letter last time, and you didn't get around to it ever. What do you mean under consideration? You're going to consider it like, you know, a year from now? The crisis is going on now.
I said thank you for your comments, and we're going to move on to the next person.
Yeah, but see, this is exactly about lack of transparency. Lack of transparency. You're showing everybody right now what I've been saying. The lack of transparency. Shame on you, Joe. Shame on you.
Thank you, Wayne, for your comments. Next person.
Mr. Chairman?
Raymond.
Thank you. This is Ray Ingraham, Majority Leader of the RTM. I'd like to say a couple comments. Thank you to the Board of Finance on your work so far this year, and all the years that I've been on the RTM. You've been a force of what's right in this town, and I'm very happy to be working with you guys, and expect many future years of good work. Thank you.
Since there's time left on the clock, can I ask why you won't address my concerns?
Wayne, I'm not going to address your concerns specifically tonight. I will take them under consideration, and I will get back to you. Okay, other citizens' comments? All right, we're going to move on to the item number 2, which is to hear a presentation from the Andriel Group and GYL synergy, financial synergies with regards to the performance of the police pension fund, the volunteer fire incentive plan, and also the other post-employment benefits plans. Jim, how are we hooking these people in?
Good evening.
Good evening. Where are they?
That's actually Rob.
This is Rob DeLuca. I can see Michael is muted, and Luke and Charlie are also on here, and they're, I believe, muted as well. So, but as customary, I'll start off with a background of the market environment and some economic data. Charlie will give a little bit more comment and color to the specific events going on in the market. And Michael and Luke will take us through the experience of the funds, being the police pension, the fire pension, and the OPEB trust. When we met in February, we were at the starting point of the coronavirus events, and we mentioned how that was a concern and a risk, and that has obviously, as we all are very well aware, as we're gathering here via a Zoom conference to review things, has had a material impact on the economy, the markets, and society overall. So what that translates to is a lot of volatility in the investment markets. And during the first quarter of 2020, it was quite extreme. We saw it in a very short period of time, at the end of the first quarter, we saw equities decline sharply, resulting in, for the first quarter, large U.S. equities being down about 20% for the quarter. Mid-size and small-size companies were down 27 to 30%, while international markets were down around 23%. So a significant decline in stock values in the first quarter of 2020. That was also paired up with a tremendous amount of volatility in the fixed income markets, as we saw lower quality bonds behave poorly. We saw liquidity issues throughout the fixed income markets that resulted in a lot of price dislocation in the bond market. And sharing a piece of information ahead of time, as Michael will get to, is the conservative credit bias in the police pension plan has led to incremental performance there in this environment, as the higher credit bias in a tough economic environment is very helpful. So we are currently in some type of a recession. The depth and duration of it is to be determined later. But clearly, with the first quarter having GDP down approximately 4.8%, yet to be revised, and forecasted GDP to be down substantially for the second quarter of 2020, would give us a textbook economic recession. We could all agree, I think, conceptually, we're in some form of that. And paired up with that, we have a substantial jump in unemployment. The jobless claims numbers again today were another new claims of an additional 2.5 million people, bringing the continuing claims to over 25 million people, which is approximately a 20% plus unemployment rate nationally. And the data indicates that number is higher within the state of Connecticut. So it's been a very challenging environment over, as we're talking about the data from the first quarter of 2020. And we're also going to take a little peek at what has experienced in the economy and the markets since the end of the first quarter. In early April, the markets continued to be very difficult. However, they did advance slightly through the end of April. And we saw some improvement. And by improvement, what I mean is large companies were down at the end of March about 20%. By the end of April, they were negative 10% on the year. So bringing that year to date means the S&P 500 is down about 8.75% through tonight's closing values. So the markets have recovered a little bit off of the very, very difficult period we were in. However, we're not, this environment and these conditions have not finished. They haven't subsided. So when you look at equity valuations, they're very difficult to discern right now, as forward guidance from corporations have been widely withdrawn. So the expectation of revenue and earnings is very suspect and subject to a lot of interpretation. So it's going to make valuing companies and valuing the stock market challenging, and then in the near and intermediate term. We are in the belief that we will work through this environment over a period of time, but that period of time is definitely to be determined. We do not think it's going to be a rapid snapback, V-shaped recovery that happens over the course of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months. There's some structural damage that will take more time than that to recover and repair throughout the systems and throughout employment. So we think that there is opportunity in some areas, but caution still continues to be warranted. And that's the same story we're seeing domestically, we see internationally. This has led the Federal Reserve to be a large contributor of stimulus and support for the economy and the systems. We saw the Federal Reserve in March make 2 very quick adjustments to interest rates, bringing the overnight lending rate down to arguably 0. And and in doing that very, very quickly, and also turning on a number of stimulus vehicles to create liquidity in the marketplace. As I mentioned before, we saw in early March and mid-March, we saw an issue with liquidity in the fixed income markets. The Federal Reserve stepped in to address liquidity concerns and created liquidity mechanisms so that capital would flow. That doesn't affect whether or not a company is solvent or insolvent, but it makes it so that capital transactions can happen and liquidity can exist. And they have continued to expand their balance sheet at an extremely fast rate, as they're one of the key buyers of treasuries to finance the government deficit that is being incurred to support the various aspects of stimulus that are going on. So we know it's been a tough environment, and we know that we're not out of the woods. An additional piece of noise that also happened concurrently with the coronavirus was an energy price war that also put significant challenges to the markets as the energy companies suffered significantly. As we saw oil prices, crude oil prices this year are down almost 45 to 50%. In the worst of times, we had seen crude oil actually trade in what would be an anomaly where it traded to a negative price. And it did so for reasons that are mind-numbing, and that there was no place for the oil to be delivered. So it was a very unusual and unique period, and that coincided with everything else going on. So that just created a number of other challenges. And interest rates, obviously with the Fed coming to zero, as commodity prices such as energy and other consumer goods like that have come down, and interest rates have come down significantly. And we envision interest rates to stay at or around these levels for the near to intermediate term, as the Federal Reserve is not going to be raising interest rates anytime soon. The curve may steepen a little bit, meaning that, as I've talked about before, the shape of the yield curve, the relationship between the 2-year Treasury and the 10-year Treasury, that is now at about 50 basis points, which we expect to see that steepen slightly in the foreseeable future, but not significantly. And then that might get to 60 or 75 basis points, which would mean the 10-year Treasury may go up a little bit, but not much, as there's large amount of buying for treasuries by the Federal Reserve as well as by other foreign central banks as a way to keep interest rates down and contained. And the Federal Reserve still has additional tools at their disposal that they may look to utilize. However, the Fed has publicly said that they do not want to use negative interest rate policy, such as been enacted in the European Central Bank and the Japanese Central Bank. So the U.S. Federal Reserve has taken a firm stance against the negative interest rate policy. That's hopefully we could stay that way. I think that would, I don't really need to opine on that further unless somebody has questions. So with that,
so Rob,
yes, Joe.
In regards to that, is there, other than the rebalancing, which I think we're going to be talking about at some point, is there any other actions that we should be taking with regards to these funds?
No, we're going to get to the rebalancing recommendations, which is what the actions we think we should be taking.
Okay. Questions from the board, Charlie? You got one?
Joe, when we get to that, we'll provide some anecdotal evidence to support our recommendations.
Okay. All right.
I think I interrupted somebody.
That's okay.
Mr. Shelton, I think.
We'll proceed. Do you want to hold your questions, Charlie?
I can hold it or I can say it.
You can ask the question.
Go ahead, Charlie.
I wanted to ask Rob, just a clarification. The fund balance was down 10% from the 12/31 fund balance amount. Is that what you said?
I was referring to the performance of the actual stock market,
Not
not the actual fund itself.
Okay.
So giving you a backdrop of the environment of the S&P 500 through the end of April was down 10%, and the S&P 500 through the end of March was down approximately 20%.
How much is the fund balance?
Mr. Shelton, just to, Luke will get into more detail on that, but we did calculate the the performance through the end of April, and the fund was down just under 9%, 8.97% through April 30th.
Okay, what is it now? Do you know what it is as of tonight?
It would be higher.
It'll be slightly higher.
Yeah.
I haven't calculated the percentage.
I could walk you through those details, Charlie.
Okay, not tonight. That's all right.
No, so with that, let's shift over to Michael to take us through the experience of the funds. And I think, Charlie, that will tie together to answer a number of the questions that you're asking.
Thank you, Rob. And Luke's going to walk through the performance this evening.
Okay.
Just a reminder for anyone who speaking, if they could just identify themselves before they speak. Again, that's part of the general requirements that we're trying to adhere to tonight. Thank you.
Okay. This is Luke Violet with GYL. Charlie, Rob, thanks for the capital market overview and the backdrop. Thank you all. It's nice to convene even under these unprecedented times, but nonetheless, we'll get through this. So with that being said, I'd like to turn our attention in our standard format to the Town of Brantford Police Pension Plan for the period ending March 31st. So I'll give everyone a moment to get that report in context. And we're going to be turning to page 20 to begin. The page will say total plan information in the center.
Page numbers.
Page 20.
Yeah, I don't think we've got it here. We got the short version. Let's see. Hang on, Luke.
Yep, take your time.
Mr. Chairman, it's Michael Lepore. Would you like us to do a screen share?
Pardon?
Would you like us to put it on, share our screen? So
Yeah, that's a good idea, Mike.
okay, I'll do that. Just give me a moment, please.
Yeah, it's cutting off.
I think we may have a better version here. Let's see, because we go to page 5,
Here, Joe.
and then yeah, I think we have the full version now.
Was that it?
Yeah.
Page.
Page. Let's move those down.
Oh, yeah. Page numbers.
You got more of these? Jim, you got a couple more of those? I do. I passed mine down the line.
Okay, we got it.
Okay, I think we're on page, what did you say, 20?
Yes.
Okay, we all got page 20, thank you. And this is, for the audience, is the investment for the police pension plan. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So I'd like to turn your attention to the diagnostic in the upper right corner, risk return statistics. We typically start in this fashion, walk through some of the highlights of the plan, and then go into the dollars and cents followed by the returns. We've approached 204 periods ending March 31st. That's measured in months. So we now have 17 years worth of data, taking us back to April of 2003. You can see the maximum minimum return statistics as well as your annualized return of 4.75 versus that of the policy benchmark right in line of 4.73. As you would anticipate, as the majority of the assets are passively indexed, with the exception of our active managers in the fixed income sleeve. If we go to the section below, risk summary statistics, you'll see right there at the top, beta. Beta is a measure of the volatility of the overall portfolio. The plan having a beta of 0.92 versus that of the market or the policy benchmark of 1. Really all that means is that the plan has achieved a return of 4.75 while taking on about 8% less volatility than that for the overall market. And in the section below that, you'll see further evidence through your annualized standard deviation, which is really just a fancy word for risk. That number is also lower than that of the policy, 7.26 or 7.80, which then allows for a slightly positive risk-adjusted return, or alpha, of 0.03. What does all this mean in dollars and cents? If we look at the summary of cash flows table at the bottom portion of the page, starting to the far left under the last 3 months column, you could see a beginning market value in January of $27,287,344. Ignoring contributions and withdrawals due to the fact that that takes into consideration rebalancing activity, internal money movement, brings you to a net cash flow of $446,000 in withdrawal, leaving you with a negative net investment change of approximately $4 million for the 90-day period, bringing you to an ending market value of $22,823,549. If we pan left to right, you could see over the farther along time periods how the plan has performed. 1 year, 3 year, and gradually, obviously, as this quarter blends into the longer time periods, dating back 10 years into inception, the plan has had a net investment change of excess of $12.6 million. What I would like to do now is turn our attention to page 16 of the performance report. Page 16 should say composite performance at the top center. This is a snapshot of the overall plan. At the top blue line, you could see once again the ending market value as of March 31st. And we could briefly discuss over the time periods how the plan did from a return aspect. For the period ending March 31st, the police pension plan was down 15%. Although negative on a relative basis, outperforming the benchmark, negative 15.49. Fiscal year-to-date return was negative 10.87 versus a negative 11.37. Your 1 year number, negative 8.59 versus negative 8.81. 3 years, the portfolio is roughly flat. However, over the 5 year, 1.13 to the 1.44. 10 year, 4.08 versus 4.32, and dating back to that inception of April 2003, 4.75 to a 4.73. The police pension maintains a 55% allocation to equities and a 45% allocation target to fixed income. You could see from starting at the top, you have your equity sleeve. This is built out of a diversified basket of ETFs, both large, mid, and small cap US, as well as international and emerging markets. And we also have small allocations to both US real estate, as well as master limited partnerships for your gas and oil. Our fixed income mandate is the active manager through Mesro Financial, who, as Rob alluded to, due to the stringent credit quality bias that the town has and that the manager adheres to, they were able to perform some alpha and some added return this quarter. Below that, we have the high yield mandate, which is managed by Mackay High Yield. This is your active strategy that we've recently adopted. Also, during this environment, the conservative approach and higher credit quality boded well for the overall portfolio. And then lastly, we have the cash account, which is for benefit payments. Now, as Charlie inquired regarding the balance, as of last night's close of business, May 20th, the Town of Brantford Police Pension Plan has a market value of $24,413,357, which equates to a net market value change of $1,885,819, approximately 8.25% uptick in the plan's performance and return since the quarter end. So we have seen since the first quarter end, the markets, given the past 7 weeks or so, and still a lot of uncertainty, there was a bit of a reversion and a bounce back in some of the asset classes. We do have a recommendation for the board regarding the overall reallocation of assets. The reallocation of assets, if you have that spreadsheet handy, it's the Town of Brantford Police rebalance spreadsheet. I just want to ensure everyone has it.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. What we'd like to do here in this, at this time, and some of the other folks may chime in, the amount to sell by, this is just illustrating varying the target allocation into retrospect, more or less bringing your current balance to the targets. We would like to half these positions. So really we'd be selling about half of your fixed income and allocating half of those proceeds across the equities. With that being said, we would more or less allocate $0 to the real estate market as well as to the master limited partnerships. The reason being is real estate has experienced one of their worst drawdowns in over a decade. Probably been hit hardest due to the social distancing measures, including hotels, casinos, retail, housing, as well as the MLPs, your oil and gas pipelines, as Rob alluded to. We saw the dispute between Saudi Arabia and Russia, which sent oil prices down. And the short story is cash on hand to further review ongoing benefit payments.
Okay. Questions from the board on this reallocation? Harry?
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Are you going to stay in U.S. equities? No foreign?
Did you hear his question?
I did not. Can you repeat that, please?
Unmute. He was asking about U.S. equities versus any foreign equity markets. Harry, do you want to restate that?
That's right.
That was his question.
Yes. So at this time, we would continue to index across U.S. as well as the international exposure that we have, utilizing the same index funds that we've been utilizing.
Harry, you got a follow-up question? You fine with that?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions on this?
Need a motion, Joe?
Yeah. Yes. Jeff is making a motion. Is that what I understand?
To make the motion for the rebalance.
Alderman Corrado, second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion from board members. All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you.
Okay.
Police pension fund. We're going to move on to the fire.
Correct. If everyone could turn their attention to page 20 of the volunteer fire incentive plan.
Yeah, we need 20s. 20s and 16s.
Is it the fire?
We're on the fire. We don't have a fire.
No, sorry.
Coming down.
Yeah, we got enough. On page 20, is that what we're on here?
Correct.
Lots of paper. Maybe down the road they could issue a board at laptops and we could see this all online. All right. You can proceed.
Okay. Just a quick high level overview. Same plan really. The volunteer fire has a smaller pool of assets, so the active management, just due to the limitations of the fund size, this is really a full passively indexed pool of assets, but similar asset allocation. High level, about 4 years worth of data on this plan. The volatility is about 6% less than that of the overall market. And the risk is a bit less, 8.17 versus 8.67. Summary of cash flows, beginning January 1st, we had a market value of 1.2 million, bringing you to about a net cash flow of negative 10,000 for the quarter, and a net investment change of negative $180,761. Panning left to right, you could just see since the inception, December of 2015, the plan has net investment change of $71,000. If we pan back to page 16, we'll review the performance at a high level quick.
Got it.
Okay. The town's ending market value for the volunteer fire incentive plan was $1,043,782 for the period ending March 31st. For the quarter, you could see on a negative in relative performance metric, performing 14.73 versus a negative 15.49. Fiscal year to date, negative 10.68 versus a negative 11.37. 3 years remain pretty flat, and then dating back to inception, 2.26 versus 2.33. Really same underlying assets, except for the investment sleeve pertaining to the fixed income. It mirrors the police pension plan as it stands as of the close of business last night. The fire pension plan assets were $124,040. A net market value change of approximately $83,000. And this plan was up just north of 8%, 8.03% over the past 7-week span. In terms of reallocation of assets pertaining to the rebalance spreadsheet, we are recommending the same methodology that we would like to implement with the pension for the police, that we do the same for the fire. So you'll see the months sell by, we would be cutting those transactions in half, as well as avoiding both the U.S. real estate and MLP markets at this time.
I'll move that, Jeff.
Okay, motion's been made to move by Robert and
A second.
seconded by Harry. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And last but not least, if I could turn your attention to the town of Brantford OPEB Trust. This happens to fall on page 21.
Okay, Luke, thank you. We can proceed with the OPEB trust.
Okay. So for the OPEB trust, very similar storyline as well. Same allocation as the two other plans we just alluded to. You're going to see here in the beta statistic here, a lot less volatility, about 16% less, mainly due to the large cash allocation that's being held at this time, which is further evidenced by your standard deviation. And we saw a slightly positive risk-adjusted return, or alpha, of 0.06. Summary of cash flows, beginning January 1st, we had a market value of $24,491,230. A net investment change for the quarter of negative $2,880,840, bringing you to an ending market value of $21,606,297. And over the course of this plan, dating back to July of 2011, the OPEB Trust has had a net investment change in excess of $2.3 million. If we flip back to page 16, we can experience the plan in high-level detail. All set. At the top level, you could see for the quarter, a less dramatic effect in terms of the two pension plans, mainly due to the cash on hand currently. So for the quarter, we saw a negative return of 11.76 versus negative 12.35. Fiscal year to date, negative 8.33 versus negative 8.83. 1 year, negative 6.11 versus negative 6.31. 3 years really in line with one another, 1.17, 1.22. 5 year, 209 to a 2.29. And dating back to inception, 3.98 versus 3.90. Here on this plan, you could really see the experience of each of the underlying holdings, as Rob alluded to. S&P 500 right there at the top, just shy of down 20% to give you a gauge of really the U.S. domestic markets, followed by your mid cap, small cap, international, emerging, as well as your real estate and master limited partnerships. You could see based on the experience of both those asset classes why for the time being we are not allocating new dollars. But it is important to note since the quarter has ended, both the Illyrian MLP has returned 56% just in the past 7 months. and within those 7 weeks, my apology, and the real estate markets have rebounded about 4.5%. But overall, the fixed income mandates, both active, they provided some excess returns. Similar to both other plans, if you pull the reallocation of assets or rebalance spreadsheet for the OPEB, this one is just a slight difference. We have a large cash position due to the healthcare plan. So if we extrapolate out the contribution of $5,375,000, what this will depict is about a sale from fixed income of about $200,000. And that $200,000 is to be more or less allocated across the equities. We will furnish the board with an updated copy that portrays the same rebounds contemplated in both the fire and police pension.
Okay, so tell me why we should feel comfortable at this point in time when the only reallocating cash from OPEB, which is the only thing, cash was the only thing that didn't get impacted, obviously, over the past 3 months. And now you're asking us to reallocate close to $6 million into equities at this point in time.
No, Joe, that's not what we're recommending, Joe.
Tell me what you're recommending on the far right column.
So that is what you're looking at is just a template that if we were to just take the OPEB and put it to its policy, what would be required. Our specific recommendation to the board for consideration is to isolate the $5,375,000 and not incorporate that into the rebalance discussion. That brings the OPEB fund balance down to $17,577,000. And within that, we would move.
The two other worksheets we looked at, one was for the police pension, which I think you said half. Is that what you said for both of these?
Yes.
So just going back to the police pension, the allocation is going to be 700,000, half.
Roughly speaking. Yep, that's correct.
And the 56,000 on the fire is going to be halved again.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, so that, I don't know if the board was aware of that. Conscious that we were looking at these numbers that weren't correct. So now when you're talking about the OPEB, what are you suggesting?
We're recommending adjusting the OPEB by moving $200,000 out of the fixed income, which is reducing the fixed income allocation from allocation to Mesero, which is at approximately 39%, down to just under 38%.
Okay.
And that $200,000 will be allocated accordingly across the traditional equity components within the portfolio.
Okay, so I disregard this column on the right.
Correct.
And the next column.
Right. Due to the timing and transmission of information to the board for this meeting, we could not provide you with an updated spreadsheet prior to this presentation tonight. So that will follow accordingly.
Okay, so the motion you're looking at is to reallocate $200,000. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Questions from the board? Somebody want to move it?
Let them make the move for the $200,000 reallocation.
That's Jeff. Thank you. Seconded by Victor. Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Rob and folks.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Yeah, take care.
Good evening.
Okay, next on the agenda is to hear a presentation, the fiscal 19 audit by Bloom Shapiro and Company. have the partner Ron from Bloom Shapiro.
Off on the back of the presentation.
I want to welcome Ron Matzek, CPA engagement partner from Bloom Shapiro.
Thank you very much for having me. I'll go through the audit results quickly and at a pretty high level relative to the financial information. But topically, what I'll go over is the engagement scope and reporting results, some financial highlights, and then I'll just quickly walk you through required auditor communications, which were delivered with the audited financial statements to you already in a formal letter. But I'll just go over those with you relative to the intent of those, and then take any questions you may have. And hopefully not too much of your time, but there's a few things obviously we want to convey. So starting on slide 3 here, I think you all have the slide deck. Just some background as to what it is we're doing relative to the audit. Governmental audits in the state of Connecticut, and I think in most states in the United States, are performed actually under 3 sets of standards. We're performing an audit under generally accepted auditing standards. We're performing it as well under generally accepted governmental auditing standards, which is commonly referred to as Yellow Book. And then we're also required to perform an audit under uniform guidance, which was formerly the Federal Single Audit Act, and as well here in the state of Connecticut, the Connecticut State Single Audit Act. Those two focus purely on the federal grant or state grant programs that we're auditing, as opposed to the overall financial statements of the town. So relative to those 3 sets of standards, if you will, we're issuing reports attributable to each of those individually. Our primary audit opinion, page 1 of the audit report, is under generally accepted auditing standards, and we've issued an unmodified or clean audit opinion on the financial statements as of June 30, 2019, which basically says, in our opinion, the financial statements fairly represent the financial position and results of operations of the activity of the town for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2019. Under governmental auditing standards, or Yellow Book, we are required to gain an understanding of the internal control structure surrounding financial reporting, and also to gain an understanding of compliance requirements relative to financial reporting, and report to you any significant deficiencies in material weaknesses relative to the internal control structure, and report to you any violations of compliance that we may encounter during the performance of our engagement. Again, the reporting results for those, there were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses that were identified relative to internal control over financial reporting, and there were no violations of compliance that would be material to the financial statements that we would be required to report to you. In fact, there were no compliance violations that were found, be they material or immaterial. So under uniform guidance and state single audit, it's very similar to Yellow Book, other than the internal controls and the compliance relate solely to the federal program or programs and state program or programs that we're auditing. And again, in both of those cases, relative to federal single audit, there were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses relative to internal controls over the major programs that we tested. Actually, that's true for both federal and state single audit. And then under both federal and state single audit, there were no violations of compliance relative, again, to those major federal and or state programs. If you go to slide 6, this is just a listing on the left, the federal program that was tested, that was deemed to be a major program that we tested as part of the federal single audit. And on the right are the state programs that we tested relative to the Connecticut State Single Audit. So you can see at the bottom there that the percentage coverage that we tested relative to the overall expenditures of federal funds for the fiscal year, which were $2,676,808, and your total state expenditures subject to the state single audit were $3,324,530. The reason I say subject is that there are some state programs that are not subject to the Connecticut State Single Audit Act. Those are typically formula grants like ECS and things of that nature that the award is based on prior year's activity. So there's no compliance requirements to test in the fiscal year in which those awards were received. Slide 7, this is just a snapshot here of a section of the balance sheet of your governmental funds as of June 30, 2019. My focus here would be on the general fund, but it is giving you all of your governmental funds, the fund balance position as of that date. As you can see, the general fund at the end of the fiscal year was holding $32,599,267 in fund balance. Your capital projects a little over $6 million, your sewer assessment fund a little over $3 million, and then all of your other non-major governmental funds held about $10.3 million. Anything other than the general fund, all those monies sitting in fund balance, if you will, are earmarked for a specific project or program. So it's really the general fund that we'll focus on from the perspective of financial highlights. So if you go to slide 8, again, we're just talking about general fund highlights here and general fund balance, which again at the end of the fiscal year was $32,599,267. That represented an increase of $1,973,549 from the prior year, and that increase is based on is under a GAAP basis, generally accepted accounting principles, and not a budgetary basis. And the increase was due primarily to revenue collections outperforming revenue estimates in all of the town's revenue functions. So you did well relative to revenue collections, and they were obviously able to outpace expenditures by almost $2 million. As of that date, June 30, 2019, of that $32 million in fund balance, $28,769,857 is unassigned, representing approximately 25.5% of your total general fund expenditures and other financing uses on a budgetary basis. And the assigned fund balance as of that date was $3,532,847, and just below there you can see what there were two relative categories to the assignment, the majority of which was allocated to the fiscal 19 budget of $2,825,000, and then you had encumbrances that were carried over to the next fiscal year of about $708,000. Flip again to slide 9. These are just, again, general fund budgetary highlights. And from a budgetary basis, you did quite well from a variance perspective relative to both how you outperformed your revenue estimates and also how you held expenditures and contained them within your budgetary estimates for expenditures. So these are consolidated down to revenue functions here. This is just the budgetary statement for your revenues on slide 9. And my focus to you would be over in the variance column, the very last column of the financial data. And you can see for each of the revenue classifications how well you outperformed what your estimates were. So for instance, in property tax collections, you outperformed what you estimated to collect by $2.3 million. I won't read down every line. You can clearly see that. Overall, from a revenue perspective, you outperformed your budgetary estimates by $5,115,915. So, as I said earlier, revenues came in excess of what you had anticipated. Slide 10. This is the budgetary statement for expenditures. Again, consolidated down to your expenditure functions, so general government, public safety, public works, and so on. Again, I would carry your focus over to that last column of variance, and you can see within the budgetary functions, how much you were able to contain and hold expenditures relative to the function underneath what the appropriation was. So the overall variance is $1.7 million, 1.718010. So again, positive variance. If you add the two of those together, you'd get your overall budgetary variance for the fiscal year. On slide 11, This is simply a snapshot. This is a schedule right out of the financial statements, which is your property tax collections for the fiscal year. And from the perspective of information that we look at analytically, one of the primary analytic tests we do from a revenue perspective is to look at that current levy and compare the collection percentage for the fiscal year against the last prior 5 fiscal years to see if there's anything crazy going on or variances spiking up and down relative to the collections. As you can see, and I provide for you the information up above here of this schedule. The current levy collections totaled $101,259,963, which brought a 98.5% collection rate. In my experience here in Brantford, you've always been sitting at about the 95% rate. Last year, I think we were 98.3. This year, 98.5. So you had a little bit of an uptick. But it certainly is a consistent collection rate that you achieve on an annual basis. The next slide, slide 12, is from a government-wide perspective, and this is just a snapshot. This actually is a snapshot out of the footnotes of your long-term debt for the fiscal year. And the reason why I bring this to your attention this evening is there was a pretty significant swing and increase in long-term debt during the fiscal year of $26,568,319. That was due primarily to 2 matters, one of which you were fully aware of and planned for, which was an $18 million bond issuance. And the other was not planned for and could not have been planned for, was the increase in your pension liability, and all of it applies to the MERS pension plan, which is the state plan that you participate in. The discount rate was decreased by that plan by the state of Connecticut, as well as the allocation modeling changed a bit. So you're not alone. The town of Brantford wasn't alone with seeing a significant swing in that liability. Some cities and towns saw a swing in the other direction, to be quite honest, but nonetheless, the impact, be it negative or positive, was substantial to a lot of communities. So not a unique situation. And that would wrap up, again, the 40,000-foot view of financial highlights, if you will. The last thing in here are the required auditor communications, which, again, I had indicated earlier, they have already come to you in a formal letter that accompanied the financial statements. But basically, just some background for you, the relative reason why we're required to give these to you, and we are required under general accepted auditing standards, is just to provide you information relative to these categories that in all cases would depict perhaps a bias by management relative to how they are preparing the financial statements. So in all cases, if you just look at this first one, we bring the significant estimates to you because estimates, quite frankly, are the first place and the easiest place to manipulate financial statements, be they allowance for doubtful accounts, estimated useful lives on assets, the pension liability, the OPEB liability. Those are all estimates by their nature. And if we were given any indication that management was trying to control those estimates in one manner or another to make a picture look better than it is or to make a picture look worse than it is, we would be communicating that to you, and you would do with it as you deem fit. We did issue a management letter. Before I get to the management letter, as I stated earlier in a meeting we had this afternoon, I want to thank Catherine for the assistance that she gave us relative to the audit, and in particular relative to some matters that we had to work through, and quite frankly, she worked through relative to the tax collector's office that actually we'll touch on here in our management advisory letter. And in that case, there were two comments that we made here in the advisory letter. One relative to bank reconciliations that are performed by the Board of Education. They do perform a reconciliation process, but they do not tie that reconciliation back to the general ledger. So the original accounts of record are not classically reconciled to the bank. And so we're just suggesting that they need to add that one component to their reconciliation process to make sure that what is coming out of your general ledger system agrees with the bank reconciliations that are performed. And then relative to the tax collector, we had some issues tying the collection information coming out of the tax collector's office back to the general ledger. And that was an exercise where Catherine was very instrumental in helping us get to an end result that we could audit and feel comfortable with in order to issue our opinions. So those are things I wanted to talk to you about tonight.
Thank you.
More than happy to address any questions if you have.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate the presentation. Before I open it up to the board, I'd like this, Jim, if your office could prepare a letter to the Board of Ed and as well as to the tax collector, which I will sign with regards to the the management letter recommendations, and ask them to come to the board at the September meeting to provide an update as to the status of both of those recommendations. With that, questions from the board, Charlie?
Hey, Ron, I want to go back to page 9. On the right-hand column, down the bottom, it shows 60,000 from other financing sources. Can you tell me what these other financing sources would be?
Page 9.
Page 9. On the right-hand column, down the bottom.
Yeah, those are transfers in from other funds. I can get you the detail of that.
And I just like what kind of sources?
Jim will be able to address that, Charlie.
Yeah, the largest transfer in to the general fund is actually from the sewer utility fund, and that's to reimburse the general fund for estimated medical benefits. So that's the largest transfer in from other funds.
You have to unmute yourself, Charlie. Okay.
Okay, gotcha.
You okay with that, Charlie?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Other questions from the audit? Question from the audit? All right, Ron, I appreciate the presentation and the work that you folks do.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Be safe. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item number 6, to consider and if appropriate approve a request from the ERACE, Brantford Adult Education Program Facilitator, the following 2020 budget transfers from salaries, $3,055, to employee benefits, $1,250, advertising and printing, $1,800, and memberships, $5. Have a okay, I'll try to speak up a little more. Masks are a little restricted with regards to talking, so I'll try to loosen it up a little bit, I guess. The transfer, again, is from salaries of $3,055 into employee benefits, $1,250, advertising, $1,800, and memberships and meetings, $5. Jim, you have an update on that?
Christine
She is on? Okay.
Yes, I'm here. Hello, everyone. I'm Christine Bjork. I'm part of the management team at ERACE, which is Brantford's adult education provider. And we are asking for a transfer line to another. We had some savings in our non-certified salary line. We were without an enrichment coordinator for the first quarter of this year, so we did have some savings. And during that time, we restructured a number of positions, and one being this position, so that the enrichment coordinator was just a piece of a position. And so now with that restructuring, the position includes retirement benefits. So hence the movement of the $1,250 to benefits. We also had an increase in printing and postage and advertising expenses this year. We added some Facebook paid advertisements this year for our enrichment classes. So that was the $1,800. And we went slightly over our membership conferences and meetings budget, just slightly. We had a compliance review this year that we were not anticipating.
Okay, Christine, thank you for that presentation there. Questions from the board on this?
I'll move the transfer.
Been moved by Victor.
I'll second.
Seconded by Robert. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Take care, thank you. Okay, next is item number 7. To consider and if appropriate, approve a request for the Information Technology Director for the following fiscal 19 and 2020 fund balance transfer from on-body camera and video storage for police department, 53,000, and 2 on-body cameras for police department. So it's basically a transfer within its the same fund. It is a reprogramming based on the change in scope of the project. If I'm not mistaken, Debbie and if need be, Chief Mulhern are on the Zoom. Jim, is that correct?
Yes, I see them both on the Zoom.
Correct. So it's basically, I just want to use the funds that are left over instead of using it for video storage for the car cameras and the on-body cameras, to now use it to purchase 55 new on-body cameras.
Okay. And we have the explanation that's been provided to us. Questions from the board?
Yes, Bob Imperato. So the new cameras come with a storage?
The new cameras, I believe, are host storage. Could you expand on that, Debbie?
Yeah, so there's a limited amount of storage on those cameras as far as what they can retain within the camera itself. So the plan is to move the storage for that into a cloud solution by the vendor who's selling those cameras. And that's what item number 8 is in regards to.
Thank you. Bob Imperato, I'll move that, Joe.
Okay, the motion's been moved by Robert, and seconded by Harry. Is there further discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Debbie. And item number 8 is really it's the approval of the 5-year contract, which corresponds to the approval we just did on the prior motion, and it comes to us under 42-1, which requires us to approve a contract or that's in excess of exceeds multiple years and exceeds $10,000. So what's the total? This is the total of this is $27,000 per year. Is that what I'm reading here?
Right. So the manufacturer has agreed to give us a discount the first year for the storage, $19,000. And then for the next 4 years is $27,000, which is a fantastic price. It's better than any state contract. It's not really a contract. This is actually a subscription. I reviewed this with both Jamie and Jim, and we're just agreeing that we'll give them a commitment for 5 years.
Now, so we own the cameras.
We will own the cameras after this meeting if this is approved.
Yeah. And how many cameras are we talking about, Debbie?
55.
50?
55. So moving to cloud storage is just the obvious solution, because then The videos can be accessed from anywhere. It's unlimited, and we're talking about high definition video storage, so multiple terabytes, and redundant backup. So it's just really the way everyone is going. It just makes a lot of sense. It makes it easier for the officers when they have a case and they have to appear in court, and they could easily access, because the cloud is accessible anywhere. You could hop on the internet. They can give a temporary password to an attorney or a judge to access the video directly. No more burning CDs.
Okay, thank you. I'll read the draft resolution here. Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends to the Board of Selectmen approval of the 5-year contract with Axon Technology.
I'll move that.
Been moved by Victor.
Second.
Seconded by Jeff. Discussion.
I have a question, Joe. Charlie.
Sure.
See, number 8 says that for a total of 135.9, and I thought Debbie said the first year we got a discount and make it 19, and then the rest of the years were 27/4, so we don't come up with 135.9. Is that correct? Am I?
That's correct, and it might have been a miscommunication with Lisa when she was doing the agenda. I think I didn't have enough time to review the final number, but it's actually a little lower than that. I think it comes.
That's 127,000.
That's correct, 127,000. She probably included a little bit of the price for the hardware based upon the materials she had for me.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie, for catching up. Appreciate it. Okay, there's any other questions or comments on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you, Debbie. Good luck. And thank you, Chief. Good luck with that as well. Okay, next is item number 9, to consider and if appropriate approve a request from the Board of Police Commissioners for the following budget transfer: from overtime public events, 57,000, into vehicles, 36,000, vehicle equipment, 21,000. Corresponding motion is, or request is, from regular wages, 18,765, into safety supplies, 18,765. We have the chief on for this.
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Welcome.
Thank you. The transfer for the vehicles and the setup, I believe, is pretty much self-explanatory. That was came out of the budget discussion and the budget process, and the transfer to the safety supplies in discussions with staff and in light of the body camera project. One of the benefits of this system is that if a electric conductive weapon, or what you commonly would know as a taser, is pulled out and activated, the body cameras will activate. So in looking at our inventory of our current deployed units, found that many of them were over 10 years old, and that's kind of problematic. So I moved for this transfer to purchase 15 of the X26 models, or the newer ones, and replace the aging ones. It'll give us a head start on the replacement process, and we'll continue with 2 or 3 a year as we have been once we get this head start.
Okay. Thanks, Chief. Questions from the chief on this transfer?
Move the approval.
Moved by Harry.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Robert. Is there discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Chief. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, next is item number 10, to consider and if appropriate approval request from the Human Services Director for the following budget transfer for fiscal 2021. And it's from contingency 10,556, transfer out to Human Services Fund for the same amount, 10,556, and corresponding transfer within the Human Services Fund transfer in from general fund, which will increase the budget by 10,556, and increase salaries and wages 10,556. With us, I believe we have Peter Semino. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Joe. It's Peter Semino speaking. I'm requesting this because what we have done with we have a business consultant that we've been working with for the past couple of years and helping us look at the agency and looking how we can improve the efficiencies, plus the personnel that we get in. So what we did a study, actually we did the study last year, and looking at the average salaries of the agencies within our area. And we found that we're kind of low in getting the averages up to where it needs to be for our clinical staff. So what I'm trying to do is to get for at least 7 of my staff to bring them up to be within the area. Mostly are clinicians that have had many years experience. And the difficulty if we don't bring this up is getting new people in. We're too low in bringing in good clinicians. We need to have people that are willing to work in the efficiencies that we're trying to create. So we want to bring everybody up. So within the area, and that's why I'm looking to at least increase some of the salaries of at least 7 of my staff.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Questions from Peter with regards to these transfers?
I have a question, if I may permit.
Who is this?
Carolyn Sires, District 5 Rep.
Pardon?
RTM for District 5.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
I'm on admin services. Just a question is, there was excess revenue in the budget for this year. Why wasn't it taken out of that? Why is it out of contingency?
This is the new year budget, ma'am.
And Peter, he had mentioned that he has 2 vacant positions. Are they currently vacant? 2 people left the employment?
No, I have one vacant position.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions can be referred to the RTM process after this meeting. So I'm going to read the resolution. Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends to the RTM an increase in Human Services Fund budget for fiscal 21 from $1,643,346 to $1,653,902. The increase will be funded through a transfer in from the general fund.
I'll move that.
Been moved by Victor and seconded by Jeff Follett. Discussion. All in favor? Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Okay, next is item number 11, which would be to consider and if appropriate, approve a request from the town planner for the following fiscal 20, which is the current year budget transfer for the planning and zoning from regular salaries and wages, 13,000 to consulting services, 13,000. And we have a letter that is asking because they have an absence of the assistant planner and zoning enforcement officer and their training replacement staff. So this consulting services will, I guess, be an interim step. Jim, do you have additional information, or Jamie, on this?
Yes, the assistant planner position has since been filled. We do have a new staff, so that is helping out. And we had used this consulting services during the vacancy of that position. However, we do have a vacancy on the CEO position, and so the town planner, but during the transition period, to keep this consultant on for a few more weeks to help bridge the transition. However, I just do want the board to know that that position will soon be filled. An offer has been made to an individual, and he has accepted and is anticipated to start in a couple weeks.
Okay.
So this is to help bridge through the transition. The planner would have been here, but he has a conflicting meeting tonight.
Right. Okay. Questions on this from the board? Somebody want to move it?
I'll move it, Joe.
Moved by Robert,
I'll second it,
seconded
Joe.
by Charlie. Thank you. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Next is to consider and, if appropriate, approve a request from the Assistant Finance Director to establish a bank account with the Bank of America for credit card donations for the animal shelter, and to approve the following resolution. Resolved that the Board of Finance authorizes the Finance Director and/or Treasurer to establish an account with the Bank of America for animal shelter credit card deposits.
I'll move that.
It's been moved.
You need a second?
Second, Joe.
And seconded by Jeff. And I was going to give Catherine a minute to.
Let me just
provide a little
mute
more
everybody.
information. Getting a little more feedback here. Catherine, are you?
Should I wait until I finish?
Which? Do you have two going on over there? All right, turn one off. Okay, good. All right.
So recently I was approached by Laura, who I did ask to attend the meeting, and the consultant that's been working on the capital campaign. You know, these are trying times for everyone with this pandemic, and they haven't been able to hold some of their fundraising events that they normally hold. So they're looking for a different type of platform as opposed to having their pasta dinners and other their outreach to the public. So they were looking at doing an online platform that they allowed to take credit cards. So they approached me because right now everything goes to the general fund. But with the number and the amount of donations that she gets, I thought it was going to be easier if we opened up a separate account just for these credit card deposits. It'll be easier to track, it's easier to reconcile with the systems. Just keep it separated from the general fund. Usually it's Jen, myself, and the treasurer. And it's just really a
Yeah, they need some money market accounts, right? They should open.
No, it's a regular checking account.
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's part of the account's umbrella. It would just be another account. They do have PayPal, but the online platform that they're looking at does not interface with PayPal. So that's the need for this other bank account. Did I represent that all right?
Discussion, any additional discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Good luck, Laura, with your activities. Okay, next is number 13, is to consider and a request from the Finance Director to recommend that the Board of Finance appoint. Okay, as the letter says, pursuant to state statute and towns with a Board of Finance, the Board of Finance is the appointing authority. And so that's why you're being asked to approve this tonight. In some other communities, it could be the Common Council. And
we've had conversations. I had conversations with the first selectman, and we're thinking of renewing it for another year. I know there was some discussion in other years about possibly, doing an RFP, but at this point, absent that, they would need to actually start in June to do some year-end testing, and then they would be coming back in the fall. And we're also required by OPM to notify them of the appointment, and they've reminded us that we had to do that. But the way the meetings were working and the COVID situation, obviously, gave us some delay as well. So.
Jim, what was the last year's fee?
It was $810 less, so I guess it was,
Okay, no, that's reasonable. Thank you.
I'll move it, Joe.
Okay, just gonna unmute myself here. Okay, the motion's been made by Robert, seconded by Victor. Thank you. And discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Jim. Okay, item number 14 is to hear an overview of the fiscal year 2021 budget from the finance director and to set the mill rate for fiscal 2021. Jim, you want to provide the overview on this for us?
Sure. Okay. I think it's a. Am I echoing badly?
Yeah.
I was just looking for that other sheet. Am I good? Good. Okay. Well, basically, as you might expect in a normal year, there's a lot to unpack, and with this year and some of the situations, dare I say, there's probably even more to unpack. We've all expressed concerns throughout the process of, what is next year going to look like, and what's the impact on our revenues going to be. And in the initial pass of the budget from the board, from this board, we dialed back some of our revenues as it related to fees, permits, interest income, and you may recall we lowered the tax collection rate to 98%. That is our largest revenue source by far. We just heard tonight it was 98.5 in the, in fiscal year 19. This year is shaping up to be a good year as well in tax collections, but again, those collections came in pre-COVID. I think the chairman, where we are, when he said that he was profoundly aware that the budget was forged in the midst of a national pandemic due to the COVID-19 virus. Admittedly, I'm hard-pressed to find a comparable experience in my decades of service to the town as Board of Finance Chairman and Finance Director. So not only have I seen this in my 33 years of working in municipal government, but your chairman, who has more total years than I do, although he's not much older, but he has a lot of years in, is also recognizing that this is a one-off event and not that we've encountered in our lifetime. To the year is, are we being conservative enough? And should we make adjustments to that collection rate? And I know that a lot of my colleagues and the informal surveys we do, many of them are keeping their collection rate only slightly lower than they've had, and keep kind of coming back to somewhat of a thought that on average, because escrow accounts will probably perform better than non-escrow accounts, but then some areas may perform worse. But on average, is it a I keep it's like an earworm in my head, and I keep thinking about it, and I'm thinking that no, that's not unreasonable. And then the question is, well, if that's not unreasonable, then you end up with a 95% collection rate, and that has its own consequences if left unchecked. And so I want to basically just touch on that a little bit, because that has implications for setting the mill rate. So I'd like to move on to some of the other changes. And I did attach the May 30th, 2017 memo that I had written at the time. I'm not saying it's 100% comparable, but during that time we were also faced with a difficult budget decision, and that was imposed by the state of Connecticut. For those of you who may recall, we were looking at having a contribution to the teacher's retirement pension fund, and also a severe reduction to state aid, which we ended up zeroing out. That was the year where we actually offset that liability or those revenue losses by appropriating more from fund balance. And in doing so, what we were doing was we were basically insulating the taxpayers. So we're trying to be conservative and place that bet, but we didn't. If we were wrong, we didn't want to overtax the taxpayers by making them sort of the counterparty to that transaction. So what we ended up doing is we used our fund balance, and that's a method that I think is worth repeating, because I think as many folks probably know, the Board of Finance at this stage of the process really only has the revenue lever in terms of adjusting the mill rate. And I know that when you folks were making some of your budget decisions, we knew it was a reval year. We were in the midst of the COVID, and the sense I was getting in the conversations that we've had publicly and privately was essentially, can we, within reason, try to reduce the mill rate? Recognizing that, it's not going to be uniform for everybody because their property values are changing because of the revaluation. And so the budget that you passed had a slight reduction in the mill rate. That budget went to the RTM. The RTM acted as speed. And so what we did is we incorporated some of their cuts. We were doing some additional proofing of our revenues, and we did find an error that we corrected, and that was helped us. It was you're going to have an error. I guess it's a good error. Helped us just a shade north of 200,000. The RTM made adjustments of 221,000, and I could walk you through those. If you got to go through some of the detailed pages, you'll see that there were reductions in the executive budget for the special project coordinator. We ended up increasing the East Shore Health budget slightly, and you may recall at the time we were using estimated numbers. As we all know, the health director is very busy and focusing on the public safety issue with the pandemic. There were reductions to the library account, both on the operating and the capital, although the capital in aggregate for the library, some of that money got transferred into the contingency. And I might add that the salary reduction for the special projects coordinator of slightly over 104, 85,000 of that got added back into contingency. There were reductions on the Board of Ed capital, bleachers at the high school, a maintenance van. The Board of Ed had communicated to the committee that, based on some residual balances in another vehicle account, they could achieve that cut. And then the asbestos in the Indian Neck, the Board of Ed was basically aware of that cut, and they did not oppose it based on how they were currently set up for that. The police, as the chief alluded to in his transfer request, basically had one of the cars was reduced, and the contingency account was increased by 102,000, and again that's the 85,000 from the special projects coordinator, plus the 17,000 from the library security, and so the anticipation is that may actually come out. Again, those reductions are 221,000, and if you go on to your next page, you'll see a series of boxes, and I apologize for the small print, but the first box is basically taking into account, if we did nothing if we incorporated the RTM cuts, incorporate the correction, and do nothing to the collection rate, you can see we're at the mill rate of 28.92. So that's a little bit of a reduction from the 29.04 that the Board of Finance had approved. So we wanted to show what would the mill rate be if we did nothing else but take the RTM cuts and lower the collection rate. So in that scenario, you can see that the RTM adjustment and the 95% collection rate would yield a 29.83 mill rate. So now you basically, in incorporating that, you would have a higher mill rate than the current mill rate of 29.07, and you would also be, essentially, increasing the taxes in a year that folks probably, and you folks have mentioned before, we're not looking to do. And so then the question is, well, all right, if we replicate what we did in 2017 and we offset that with fund balance, that's what the last scenario shows. And in order to do that, if you look under non-tax revenue, you'll see where it says additional appropriation from fund balance, and that would basically be an additional 3,190,000. So you're looking at roughly 6,910,000 and change. And what that does, that brings you back to the 28.92. And so you effectively met your target of lowering the mill rate from the current year, and you insulated the taxpayers. Now, one of the things I know that you folks are aware of, because we talk about it a lot, it was mentioned in some of the public comments that, about the rating. And so one of the things that you guys are aware of, that you had approved a refunding resolution, and we also have other authorized unissued debt. In addition to working on the budget and the other things our office is working on, we're also working on a negotiated bond sale. We have a call with the rating agencies a week from today. So obviously, I wanted to make sure, in reaching out to our professional advisors that help us in these transactions, that the action we are taking is not going to jeopardize, the case we want to make to the credit agencies. And we were basically told that, because we have a plan for this, it generally would be seen as a one-time event. We would still have a healthy fund balance after this, recognizing we're trying to take more of a worst case scenario. Throughout the year, there are different things we could do to mitigate that. I think we would try to protect the general fund, pretty much we would probably pull out other stops, excluding, say, pensions and OPEBs, but, some of the other areas of the budget do have other balances. Workers' comp fund has a balance, the medical self-insurance fund has a balance. And so, but those are things that we wouldn't necessarily do without, when I say we, meaning the finance department, without coming to the board at that time. We're going to actually have, obviously monitor where we are going forward. We're also aware that the RTM, pursuant to a recommendation from myself, the first selectman and tax collector, opted for the governor's plan to extend the grace period to October 1st on tax collections. So not only are we concerned that that the collections could be lower, but also that we won't necessarily be able to see that until October, because folks will have a longer period to pay. I'll make a quick prediction. I suspect that if we're still in the midst of all this and there is not a vaccine by then, it wouldn't surprise me if that got extended to the second half as well. I mean, I haven't heard anybody say that, but if you think about it, you have until October, but then now you got now before you know it, you're going to have to pay in January again. So it wouldn't surprise me if there was another order that comes down the pipe. So,
Jim, let me ask you a question with regards to that. So there's a 90-day deferral that's that we've enacted for folks who choose or need to defer their payment for the July 1st payment. Is that correct?
Yeah, the grace period is extended to October 1st, which means if you pay by October 1st, your taxes are deemed to be current.
And do we know what we expect people to do? We have any idea what the behavior will be?
We don't. What we tried to do is, because we didn't know exactly what the behavior would be, we looked at it and we said, well, what would be the consequence of the worst thing? Is one way to look at it. And so we looked at those accounts that are escrowed. And so we kind of carved those out, and we might have discounted them just a slight piece, because our understanding is that the banks will continue to make those payments. The bank's escrow accounts have not been given the October 1st grace period.
That's about what, 30% of your payments?
About a third, yeah. And then we said, okay, so, and then what if everybody else, went to October 1st? And then we looked at some of our expenditure patterns from the prior year, and what might we delay if we needed to. And those would be contributions to the self-insurance funds if we had to, and we'd still make the full payment throughout the year, unless they came back to you and said that, the roof is caving in, and so maybe this is the year we don't do that. And I also, discounted some of our year-ending cash balances based on where we were as of June 30th in the prior year. In effect, that we were basically trying to shock test it and to see where we would end up. And we believe that, we're still going to be able to meet our obligations. I've also had discussions with the library, and they were also helpful, because, we fund the first 10 months of Blackstone Library, and then the last month or two, that's where they typically draw from the endowment. But again, and we also factored in a little bit less in terms of the non-tax revenues, even in that scenario. And I know that, the fund balance gets discussed a lot, and, these are the times where I think it pays to have it.
Okay, so if the first half is, roughly $50 million of receipts that we would expect by August 1st. And if,
About 17 would be from escrow. Right?
so 17 would be from escrow, 32 million or so would be from motor vehicle, personal property, and non-escrowed real estate. So your worst case scenario is all of that gets deferred. So, but because you have sufficient cash balances,
Well, we're matching that against what we anticipate we would spend
out, we would be able to defer. You feel that you're okay on a cash flow basis.
Yeah, and one of the things that also, we have two things that are actually helping us. One is the overall fund balance, and the second is the amount of that we'd have to carry for the middle school in prior years is going to be good because we issued the 45 million last October. So it's not like there's a negative in the capital that's drawing from that. And based on the middle school cash flow,
that's not going to draw from the general fund because you've got money in the capital fund.
Not until October.
Right.
And additionally, we're looking at issuing about another 3.4 million to kind of close out the middle school. So we would borrow up to 59 for the middle school, and the rest of it would be grants. That's the new money portion when we're looking at doing the refunding. So, so that's kind of how we modeled this, and again, we'll see if it bears out. But rather than try to predict what might happen, we tried to err on the side of what's kind of the worst case. And we've had conversations with the superintendent and business manager, and they will also work with us because they're the largest, obviously, draw on our cash flow. The good news is that typically the summer months, really the largest draw or the largest expenditures kind of on the Board of Ed non-personal side is their contributions into the self-insurance funds, because they typically make those in July and January. And so that's kind of recycling the money in a way. We give it to the Board of Ed, right, back to us, and it goes into the fund. And that's something we can hold off on. And the self-insurance fund has a balance too. So if it didn't get that money right away, again, that's kind of where I'm looking at the general fund as kind of standing on higher ground than all the other funds in this whole picture. But
okay,
that answer your question?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. So really what we're saying here is that based on your third model here, that you showed the fund balance, the collection rate at 95%, and increasing the allocation of fund balance for a total of 6,910,000, which is almost 4,100,000 more than the prior year that we're just ending with regards to allocation of fund balance. That again equates to a mill rate of 28.92.
Correct.
Okay, so that's really what's in front of us with this discussion. Comments or questions from Jim?
I just want to go back to one item, Jim.
That's Charlie. Pardon?
It's on the.
Go ahead, Charlie.
It's on the asbestos at the school. I thought there was some directive from the state that you have to have an ongoing program to remove asbestos from all public occupied buildings. So
Well,
are we in?
Yeah, it's not removing it entirely. It was a reduction from 80,000 to 40,000, and
Oh, so there's still some money in there?
yeah, and I think the other thing that's important to underscore is, as was reflected in the minutes, and I had other conversations, and this kind of came up in it with both the chairman of the education committee, Frank Tuhill, and Don Neal. They were both present when this item was discussed, and so my sense was that the Board of Ed was not overly upset about it, that they basically understood. and it made sense to them, that cut in.
I was just concerned that we're, in any violation for not having an ongoing program.
Well, I don't know all the laws and programs with asbestos. I'm relying on the fact that if they were doing something that was detrimental to the Board of Ed, and obviously that's what children learn, that they would have communicated that to the committee process.
Chairman Mooney, this is Ray Ingraham. I can add a little to that.
Nope. Just one more. So this additional contribution from fund balance is our Corona contribution.
Well, actually, that's usually I'm the one making the puns at these meetings, but yeah, if you want to call it a Corona contribution, I guess you can.
That's good, Charlie.
Okay.
Okay.
Jim,
Robert?
Jim, so any collection over 95%,
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of echoes from you, but go ahead.
any collection over 95%, and hopefully we reach that, will those funds go back to the fund?
Yeah, I mean, eventually. So basically, what typically happens is on the revenue side, fund balance is going up. The amount, being raised for taxes is going to be less, right? And so, but if we collect 97%, then yeah, that's going to eventually flow to fund balance.
Okay, so it gets offset.
So it's similar to the prior year where the allocation of fund balance really insulates the drop in the collection rate, which the collection rate may recover in the fiscal year or may get picked up in subsequent years with that fund's collection. But conceivably, much of that allocation we're doing today would come back to fund balance under the model.
Right.
Again, it's adjusting, for at least the temporary reduction in the collection.
Right.
Yeah. So a good way to show that is if you look at that page with the three boxes, right? So you see the total tax requirements under the under the 95 scenario is like 100 and it's 136.52. And then if you look down if you look and see when you do the fund balance, now your total tax requirements, in other words, what you think you're actually going to raise as your revenue is 104.62.
Right.
So if you collect more than 95, your budget to actual is going to have a positive variance. Fund balance isn't really, there is no revenue credited against fund balance. It's basically a gap. And so what will happen is, anything north of 100 million, 462,786 is going to in effect offset that 6.9 million when it closes at the end of the year.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, other questions with regards to this discussion? Harry?
Okay.
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to our finance director. In the area of the tax collector's office, we've been noted in the second year with the county issue. My concern in going forward, especially in these difficult times, as you eloquently stated, is that it's going to be difficult to collect. I would ask Mr. Chairman that our finance director give us a report each of our following meetings to the end of the year on the collections, not just a sum number, collected, not collected, but to see where the problem is coming from, if there's a problem. I think that would give me comfort of knowing what we are doing and what we may have to do on the revenue side. And it seems that you've covered it very well, John. And it's totally unexpected of what's going to drive the train on health and medical issues, and not really a financial issue of a real estate debacle or whatever else. But if the pandemic were to have these red spots, it could end up with real estate problem. So
fair enough.
I would ask Mr. Chairman that we have somewhat of an in-depth report the tax collector's office.
Sure. Would you want to put that in the form of a motion? Okay. All right.
I'll second it.
The motion's been made and seconded to have a report.
Yeah, maybe what I'll do, Joe, is at least try to develop something for the format, because depending on the format that you're looking for, there's really two places for me to get it. One I control, the other one I don't. And one is the general ledger, and the other is the tax office. I don't have access to the tax collection system, which is probably an okay thing, because I don't collect taxes. But they do post to our general ledger. So I think, and I understand what you're looking for. I have a member on my staff who I've also asked to kind of month to month, what did we do last year? I mean, we could see that in the general ledger side, but in terms of, what type of property, and it's a great question, because I'm full disclosure, I was actually and the assessor and I have been having conversations, because in this whole kind of thing, when I'm wrestling with this, it's like, I talk to some of the other towns, but they seem like they're the same, but they're not. And so you got Guilford and Madison, right? Much wealthier towns. Everybody associates us with those two towns. They're much wealthier towns. Their household income is higher. Their unemployment rates typically are lower. Now, our unemployment rates are typically lower than the state. And, it'll be interesting to see when the next reports come out. States was at 3.7. We were typically at 3.4. But that doesn't bake in all of those numbers. The other thing I look at, well, we have a lot of properties on the hill. How much retail do we have? Retail's getting clobbered in this environment. So are those people that can't pay? So where does that fit in our grand list? And, there's not a canned report for that. So the assessor's trying to put that information together. So there's different things that we're trying to look at. So, I think, I'll put something together for the general ledger. You guys take a look at it. And then I also reach out to you guys as well. When the mortgage bankers information comes out, I know some of you guys get those reports. I saw the April numbers. They didn't look great. They're on like 7% now, Bob. And then the ones that are federal loans are treated differently. But I got to think that's got to track the unemployment rate somehow. And Connecticut's unemployment claims are rising. Not like Connecticut was leading the country in terms of its economy. Now, it is a high income state, which is on the plus side. So, right now is, we're placing a hedge, if you will. And, but this is different, I think. I think about, risk, right? Well, this isn't quite risk. This is something totally different. I flip a coin. You can measure risk. You can roll a dice. You can make bets worth on risks. This is uncertainty. This isn't even risk, because it's uncertainty. And so that's why sometimes I say, well, okay, we're no longer talking about probabilities. It's not the probability of something happening. It's the consequence of something happening. And that's kind of where we get, we're all in this trying to figure this out. So anyway, I'm probably doing too much of a brain dump here.
Oh, that's good, Jim.
But
your approach is, your words are good. And Harry, thank you for that recommendation. We'll put it into, we have a motion on the floor to request a monthly update through from the finance director with regards to tax collection and in conference, hopefully with the tax collector for any detailed information. If you have particular information you think might be helpful, you can work with Jim to develop that template. That'd be helpful. And Robert. And so that's a long-winded motion, and I will accept somebody to move it.
It's been moved and seconded.
Been moved and seconded. Thank you for that reminder. Any additional discussion other than Jim? No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
When are the bars opening? No.
So we're going to get back to the matter at hand here, which is to And I should have a motion to
it's in
set the mill rate somewhere in here, Jim.
Yeah, it's on the one with budget highlights. It's the last paragraph.
So let me resolve that the Board of Finance established a mill rate for fiscal year 2021 at 28.92 mills pursuant to the budget adopted by the representative town meeting. Somebody want to move that?
I'll move that.
Moved by Charlie, seconded by Jeff. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Okay, so before we adjourn, I'd just like to make a few comments here. I really want to thank Lisa and Henry and Jim Finch and Catherine and others. In particular, Jim, for your continued great service to the town and great insights and hard work. I really appreciate that. And I know the board does. And Jamie, you have any final comments for tonight?
Just want to thank the board and yeah, once again, Joe, echo your thoughts to the finance department, both Jim and Catherine, for the tremendous work, not only this developing this budget, but really through their service to the town throughout the year. I think we, even heard tonight, Catherine's involvement with the audit. And, we're fortunate in Brantford to have an excellent team, the board included, especially during these challenging times. As Jim said, the uncertain times. These are really the uncertainty. So I just, once again, thank everybody and be safe.
Yeah, be safe, everyone. Thank you very much for participating. Hopefully we were as clear and transparent as possible with regards to tonight's meeting. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Good work. Good work, guys. Good night. This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Brantford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at brantfordtv.org.